Welcome to LilyPod if you're listening, and LilyTube if you're watching. We have a special guest today. Her name is Becky Mackintosh. She is the author of Love Boldly, Embracing Your LGBTQ Loved Ones and Your Faith. Experience Becky's journey and witness how her faith allowed her to embrace her religion and her gay son. She'll tell you that the answer to every question and conflict is love. Becky's a popular speaker, well known for her inspirational stories, honest approach, and open heart. She is married to Scott Mackintosh, the neighborhood boy who lived near her childhood home and grew up to be her husband. They have 7 children and 16 grandchildren and counting. Becky found herself becoming more open about her experiences as a Latter-day Saint mother of an LGBTQ loved one, receiving emails and calls from other concerned parents as well as the LGBTQ children themselves. Since then, she has armed herself with tools such as mental health first aid, as well as grief support and QPR. The Mackintosh family was filmed for the Mormon and Gay website, a video that now has over 1 million views, which we actually watched the other day. It was awesome. And we'll provide a link in the description of this episode. Welcome, Becky Mackintosh. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Becky, I'd like to ask you sort of out of the gate, a question about that part of your book title on faith. I know that the people we typically work with are divorced, sometimes widowed. Occasionally there's somebody who's not ever had the chance to marry it yet. The question then is, I mean, I think particularly with respect to divorcees, a lot of them don't feel like they have a place in the church. And feel like, well, gee, the pinnacle of all of our ordinances is temple marriage, and that an eternal family is what exaltation means to us. And I think it's got to be true that many of those issues are also applying to people in the LGBTQ community.
Yes. And I think, we need to lean more into sensitivity and making space for all. And I think the reality is more kind of outside the ideal or the perfect. There are no perfect families, not even in the scriptures, which I love so much, that there aren't perfect families in the scriptures. They're filled with imperfect people dealing with so many of the same challenges and stuff that we are dealing with. And those that are able to pull their families together or to make it through those tough challenges are those that are turning to God and walking in faith. So I find great hope from that. But you're so right. Like, so many feel othered or they don't fit. And so we need to do better at creating that space and reaching out and be sensitive to people around us that may be having a faith crisis or have gone through a divorce or are separated or have a LGBTQ loved one, and be sensitive to those needs. So when we're teaching a lesson or hear something that maybe is insensitive, to turn it around and add that loving piece and recognize that not everybody, there's no 2 journeys alike, that everyone has a different path and we all have different things that we need to learn and grow and experience in life. And we need all to come together and under Christ and to help to lift and support each other.
I love that. And I think you started with lean into, I don't even remember what you said, but empathy, compassion, understanding, and love, like you said, the answer to all things.
Yeah.
I think what you said, the answer to every question.
It really is simple, like
The answer to
love,
everyone
love,
question
leaning
and
into that love. And I have a daughter who went through a divorce. You know, that was not on her vision board. She married the return missionary in the temple. Like that was not on her vision board.
Yeah, we both know that
Having
story.
a son, having a son come out as gay, that was not on my vision board. Like there's so many scenarios that we didn't plan for, and that's okay. It's like, this is the reality of my situation, and how am I going to move forward in the best positive way? And for me, you know, love boldly, like the title of my book, Love Boldly, means just that, like leaning into that love. It's strengthening relationships, which are most important, you know, our family relationships and even outside of our family circles, but those relationships within our family are so important. So when something is not the ideal, that's okay. That is okay. Like, how are we going to move forward and make the very best out of this?
Can you define for us what loving boldly means to you? And why you picked that title maybe too?
Yeah, I kind of touch on that. It's loving boldly. And I think the Savior was the greatest exemplar of that. He lived a life of loving boldly. He reached out to the marginalized, the sick, the afflicted. Like, he lived a life of loving boldly. And that's what it means. Like, love boldly, like lean into love. Every situation and circumstance, respond from a place of love, compassion, empathy. Like, love boldly. Don't be afraid to love, to lean into that love.
Becky, when your son came out to you, I mean, I'm sure that was a shock. I don't know, maybe you suspected it, but were you instantly kind of in this loving space, or has this been a journey?
It was a shock, yeah. A thought that had kind of crossed my mind, because he wasn't pursuing girls. A lot of girls were pursuing him, but he was like, oh, I don't have time. He was a straight A student and preparing for my mission, can't have a girlfriend, those type of things. So the thought had crossed my mind, but it was a shock, like the rug had been pulled out from under me. First thing I did was drop to my knees. So, Heavenly Father, how do I respond to this? And the answer was so clear, like, you love him unconditionally. Like, well, yeah, I can do that. I love him. It was a journey and a process to figure out what that really looked like, because you think, well, I can't love, I can't condone. Yeah, I can love, but kept putting stoppers on that, qualifiers, which are ridiculous. But it was a journey and a process to figure out what that really looked like. Like when he wasn't dating, that was a lot easier. Okay, life is good. All right. And then when he was dating and wanting to bring someone that he loved and cared about home, then it's like, oh, what's this going to look like? What's this going to feel like? And when he got engaged, and he is now married to a man, to a return missionary, I must say, it's what I prayed for. My kids would go up and marry a return missionary. He did it. None of those things were on my vision board. And it was a process and a journey, and continually seeking guidance. And God's answer was always love him, love. And when I finally understood to just lean in to love and love my son and honor his agency. He was an adult. He was 24 years old when he came out. That's the hardest thing. Like, we fought for and voted for agency, and we think agency is just great. We're all for it until we have children and we have teenagers, and then we're like, wait, hold it, let's stop the agency thing.
I'm having almost teenagers right now, so I get that.
Yeah. So I don't even remember what your question was. I've gone way off
How did
track,
you feel?
Probably.
Well, his question was
it a journey, or did you
it a
accept
journey?
it right
And you
away?
answered that, but my follow-up.
It was a journey. And I'm very open and raw and real about it in my book of our bumpy journey. Like
Yeah.
I would write a chapter and I'd send it to my son and he'd say, oh, that's really great, Mom. But I remember you said this. So you responded this way. And I think, oh, was I really that bad? So yeah, Mom, they know the ending. They know the happy, loving ending. Let's take them through the real journey.
Yeah, get real.
But
And that's how our book is too. Intentional courtship is all about like the rough patches of, like figuring out how to do divorce and singlehood and dating in your 30s and 40s and 50s. It's something that people have said, yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Like anyone who's experienced that knows. And so I guess my follow-up question, because I think any parent would like be very interested in knowing, how did that feel when he finally brought, someone he was interested in home, and it wasn't the same, the same sex as you had initially anticipated?
Yeah. Well, first I was pleasantly surprised of how wonderful this person was and how kind and nice. And I don't know why I was surprised. Like my son would be dating and really caring about someone that was wonderful. And I don't know what I was expecting, but I was just kind of surprised. Like, oh, he's a really great guy. But yeah, it's different. For example, the following morning, after we had met, his boyfriend had come over for dinner and we played family games and such. And the next morning when my son called me, he said, so Mom, what did you think? And I said, oh, he was really nice. It was good. I just thought of him as, he was just you and your friend. And he said, Mom, that hurts when you say that, because he's more than a friend. He's someone that I really care about. And you gotta be patient. Like, this is really hard to wrap my mind around. And it was a journey to embrace the reality of our situation, thinking how this is our reality and how are we going to move forward? And I'd have to stop and ask myself, and this was a journey in learning this too, is what I'm going to say or how I'm going to respond, is this going to strengthen our relationship or drive a wedge into our relationship? Family is central to God's plan. Family is most important. And so, keeping those relationships together and strengthening them, focusing on strengthening them and keeping the lines of communication open. Success to me is that my 7 children and their spouses and grandchildren want to come home. They want to come over. They want to be around me. They want to be around each other. And we are a very diverse family. Within our family, we have different race, different political views, different religions, different sexual orientation. So on paper, it looks like we should just always be fighting, but we're not. Like, we are each other's biggest cheerleaders, and respect and love for one another. But that too was a journey. Like, one of the chapters in my book is called House Divided, because it was a journey and a process for each person to go on in, processing the new dynamics in our family and such. It's a process, but our focus, our goal was to be united and loving, to be a family and create that space where we want to be around each other.
That's awesome. And I noticed that he responded with, this is how that feels for me, so that he could help you understand how he needed support.
Yes, he was so good. And it was so helpful for my husband and I, because he would do that. He would call us out and he'd say, that's really hurtful when you say that, and this is why. And he's the only one who can really do that. Yes, exactly.
That's good, because we encourage people who may be experiencing similar feelings in their families, if no one else has been divorced and they're feeling like an outcast, to be able to speak up for themselves and be able to say, hey, this would really help me out if, X, Y, Z. And I know, like, from my first husband's family, there was one person in particular who stayed in touch with me, who went to the temple with me, who grieved with me, and who remained my friend. And she didn't pick sides. She continued being supportive of him and me. And that meant the world to me. I mean, because you not only lose a spouse, you lose like a whole extended family. And
Yeah.
and it's interesting how lovingly she showed up, and not that long later, she also had an LGBTQ son come out. And I think she was up for the challenge because of how she chose to lean into love with me and others, you know, in maybe similar situations that maybe aren't, like you said, they're not the traditional original vision board, you know, ideals. But anyway, I see a lot of what you're doing in her and you, and I think that's amazing.
If I could ask you something too, along these lines, going back a little bit, you talked about how, you know, one of your first reactions when you found out about your son and his orientation was you were thinking, I can't condone, you know, and we've experienced that in another, you know, in another realm. Of course, we're talking about divorce, but I think there is a certain mentality among a number of church members that I have to be careful about who I associate with if there's a divorce, because I don't want to pick the wrong side, or I don't want to condone something that somebody's done. And, you know, we probably did that ourselves before we went through it. And so, I mean, I think it's not necessarily that if we're ministering to somebody, trying to show love and so forth, it doesn't necessarily mean that we endorse everything they do, or you know, choices that they make. It's what you said at the beginning, that love is the answer. And even if, you know, somebody had an affair or, you know, did something that we consider to be sinful, I don't think it's up to us to make judgments about who's at fault and to take sides and that sort of thing. And I mean, I would guess that the same kind of, well, that maybe your son has had the same kind of experiences where people don't want to condone, and they don't know exactly what to, you know, what to do or how to react to him.
Right.
And your daughter, for that matter, who's also divorced.
And she's remarried now. It's great to see her happy again and to have that joy back in her life.
That's great.
Yeah, and the blended family, and it's been fun to watch that. And that's, yeah, as you know, that's a journey in itself. And I'm just, yeah, so proud of her, and a lot of great lessons and things have been learned through that. I forget your question.
Well, the question was kind of, how do we get past that, that social and cultural,
yes,
I can't condone what somebody does, and if I be nice to them, I'm condoning what they're doing, you know?
right. And again, I think it goes back to, like, we're all imperfect beings. And so, you know, offering each other grace, being kind and compassionate, and you know, listening is a great tool to helping to increase understanding, but just kindness. Again, you know, the Savior, he was the exemplar of outreach and loving, and being with those that on paper he shouldn't have been with. And there were people that judged him. And he showed us how to lean in with love, and how to make people feel important and that they belong. And that's what brings people to Christ. And that's what strengthens families, is that our relationships, is that leaning into that compassion and empathy, and truly seeking to understand, and letting go of the things that you can't control. And really the only thing we can control is the way we respond and act to a situation. Just throw the word condone out the window. It's like, people know your values. They know. Right. You don't need to lecture or preach. Like, they know. They just need you to love them and let them know that you care about them.
Well, and whatever they're going through is hard enough. I mean,
Yes.
that's usually the conclusion I've come to. And the thought has come to me as you've been talking about, well, if the Savior spent time with the people he shouldn't have, then he condoned all of that. If that's a word that we're going to keep, right? So we're going to throw it out. I love that idea.
Mhm.
And also the shouldn't have is possibly even a judgment sometimes we make. And if he did, then he absolutely should have, like the things we think we shouldn't do are the things we should do in the name of love, rather than, and then throw out the condoning, throw out the judgment, and just like you said, lean into the compassion, the love, the empathy, and let every human be loved rather than, judged and condemned. And I love that message.
I mean, I think in your situation, it would be natural, I guess, with the strong beliefs that we have, to be worried about it and that sort of thing. But I also think one of the things that I have had to lean into, being divorced twice, is, that wasn't, kind of like we've talked about already, that wasn't what I thought God's plan for me was. Could divorce possibly be part of God's plan for me? Was that part of the script? Is that really my path? And coming to terms with that was really difficult because of what you said. We place the family on such a pedestal, and it's central to our faith. And so it just strikes me, I guess, that, it's hard to imagine, I'm sure, for someone in your shoes, especially at the beginning, could this really be part of God's plan? I think we have to understand maybe that God is going to be working with us 10 million years from now.
Yeah.
And that he works in mysterious ways. He knows things we don't. If I had known how things were going to turn out, that I was going to be with this wonderful woman, and just the way my life would be now, doubled the number of kids I had with steps and all of those things, I wouldn't have worried so much. It wouldn't have been so, painful. And I think maybe to some degree, I didn't trust enough that God knew what he was doing. I thought the cosmos is out of balance, God's plan has been thwarted. And I don't think we can thwart God's plan,
Right. The one thing I have learned on my journey is to love one another, lean into that commandment to love, and trust God, trust him in the process. Like, though, that's my 2 words. I often wear 2 bracelets, one that says love and one that says trust, to remind me to do that, love and then trust God in the process, because nobody loves us or our family more than our heavenly parents. Like, they are working hard they want us all to return. So they're working on that. So trust them with the process and the things we all have to learn. Our focus is to focus on those relationships, strengthening those relationships, keeping God in the equation, and trusting him with the process.
Yeah, I love that. Love and trust. It's great.
And how many years had your daughter been married when she went through her divorce? You can say roughly.
7 years.
Okay, so
she had two young children,
which complicates it and makes it harder for sure. What did you do in the wake of that to help be supportive and, to do for her whatever you could?
Yeah, well, her and her sweet children moved in with us, and that was a gift to be there for her and support her. As she was having to go to work each day, and she was able to bring her work home, but still, that's hard to do your work when you have 2 young kids. So it was great to be there and help her and support her in that. And she had 50-50 custody with their father. And so navigating that and keeping that balance, because when you have 50-50, you're seeing that the person that is no longer your son-in-law, and just, keeping that loving space and that trust. And it was difficult, but good. Difficult, but good. Yeah.
We have a 50-50 arrangement with my two boys, and that's I think we've made it work. At first it was really challenging, and now it's routine. So
yeah.
I was thinking maybe of going to some of the questions that we were wondering about in anticipation of this interview with you. What specific complications do you think might be in the way of loving boldly for like middle-aged singles, for instance? Like, so what's been in your way, and all the things that you've gone through to overcome that. But I just kind of wanted to discuss what might be in the way of leaning into love.
It's a great question. I was thinking of that. What would the complications be? And the things that came to mind was maybe fear that you'd be misunderstood, fear of rejection, fear of condoning, all those things that we've talked about.
Maybe
so those
fear of losing again.
Fear of losing again.
Yeah.
Yes, fear of loss again, and not wanting to feel that pain again. So those kind of would complicate things, because it makes people withdraw, kind of paralyzes you, because you're afraid of that rejection or the pain. And again, then that boils down to, if I'm wanting to strengthen this relationship, then I've got to lean into love and trust God and trust. And it's often so hard to step into the unknown, because as human beings, our brains, I think, automatically go to the worst case scenario that we're playing out in our mind. And we need to stop doing that and trust that the best scenario is going to happen. And if it's not the best, that it's okay. We're going to keep working at it and leaning in and trusting.
Yeah, I think that you're totally spot on, because in our Love in Later Years community, that's what we see, a lot of fear. And especially for people who are being really honest with themselves about what's in the way. That's even a chapter in our book, What's in the Way? And the answer is fear, and overcoming fear is the next chapter, because it's that's a big issue. And a couple of things that we've found can help eliminate the fear and help us lean into love is, first of all, to recognize that whatever loss we've had is, it's just one person's choice and billions of people. It doesn't make us unlovable. It doesn't make us anything. It's just one person's choice. If we're, if we were left, or, if somebody didn't love us as much as they could have. And then the other is what Jeff was talking about earlier, that perhaps it was God's plan all along to have that be a temporary relationship, even though it's not what we thought it would be when we initially, because we never go into marriage thinking this is temporary. But he knows, he knows. And we have a friend actually who recently pointed out, because I know in the temple I learned that both of my previous marriages and subsequent divorces were part of God's plan for me. And I always just thought that was personal revelation, and it was. But she said, I believe that the grafting of the olive tree, the branches, that is divorce. That like sometimes we have to remove something unhealthy from our lives to make a healthier, overall picture. And I'd never really thought of that, but I think it kind of goes with what Jeff's belief now is, that if divorce is something you experienced, it's part of your path. It can be accepted as part and trusted. I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying. If you trust God, then you don't believe that something's gone terribly wrong and that he's forsaken you or abandoned you because you experienced this. This is just part of your life experience.
Right. It's part of your learning and growth. Like if we look at this earth life as a classroom instead of a test, that that helps to switch that, make that paradigm shift too. Like it's a classroom. Every experience is an opportunity to learn and grow and be better from it, and move forward better from what you've experienced and what you've learned. So life is a classroom, not a
Mhm.
test.
I love that, because we've always heard that term in church. We're here we're to be tested. Now classroom makes more sense. It does.
Yes.
Well, there are
that
tests
helps
in,
me to look at it like that.
there are
No.
tests in classrooms. But-
Yeah, but that's
Um,
more like moments rather
but
than your
it-
whole life.
Yeah. And each day is a new day to start anew and to move forward and better. And yeah, it's not a test. You got an F. Okay, you failed.
I
No,
think
this
it's-
is all a learning and growing experience.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you pointed to fear as being the thing that's in the way, because scripturally, I mean, fear is the opposite of love. Perfect love casteth out fear, and so forth.
Yeah.
And we read, for God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And I think about that a lot of the time when things happen in my life that don't really fit the program as I understood it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that, I'd like to move to my next question, which is, what specific complications are in the way of loving boldly for later married couples with blended families? And you have one, and we are one. So maybe you could speak to that and what you've observed in your own child with that scenario.
Yeah. You have to be, what I've experienced is be intentional about building that relationship with each child, and in a blended family, making each person feel special and important, and that you really care about them. Like you have to be intentional about that. And doing things that person likes to do, finding out their interests and doing things that make them feel special. And yeah, there's so many dynamics there to the blended the blended families, and again, complications would be that dang fear thing again, or that fear of rejection, or the feeling hurt. But the same solution, like leaning into love and being intentional about strengthening each relationship and making them feel special and needed and belong and an important part of the family, and needed. You have to be intentional about those things.
Yeah. Our book is Intentional Courtship, and we've talked about eventually writing a book about intentional marriage and intentional blended family arrangements, and as I've pondered what's in the way for loving boldly, I think fear can definitely be part of it. Even past traumas can get in the way of a future marriage or a current marriage. So, if it's from the past, I know Jeff and I, even within our marriage, we've had to overcome some of the past traumas to be able to love more boldly in our marriage. And I guess I've thought some of the things in the way might be ill feelings towards a former spouse or a former, in-law, that can get in the way of like family gatherings and, and communicating with a co-parent. Let's see, what else? There's all sorts of complications. Like you
Yes.
said. And
Right.
some of it might be lack of peace. Like, so not just fear, but kind of a lack of resolve, and maybe even some, I guess, heated feelings, in the interactions that we have. Like, and this is something we're still figuring out. I guess this is why we haven't written the book yet, because we're still like figuring it out. And it's a work in progress.
Because there's not one blanket answer for all and solution for all. like every family is individual, and every person, your dynamics are so different.
Well, and the
There
kind
are
of
certain
boundaries too that you have to create.
Right.
Certain people are going to be different than others.
Right. I think when you're focused on creating that unity and that strengthening those relationships, and that helps you to move forward and to be open to inspiration on how to deal with a situation or circumstance. But but it's a process.
Mm-hmm. I do think that one thing we've found for ourselves, and I think also for our coaching clients and the people that we work with in Love in Later Years community, that the best thing you can do for a future marriage is work on you. And the best thing you can do to show up in a health and create a healthy relationship with someone is to be healthy yourself. And so I think as much as you can while you're single, to find that peace, and then continue to try and find that peace as you continue and navigate. But I think as people do that, they become some of the most resilient and the most capable people of having a really successful marriage, because of all the work they do to get there. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. That was one of the things I had jotted down in my notes when I was pondering these questions too, was that self-care and offering that the compassion and forgiveness to yourself, and that grace to yourself. And you have to be able to be at peace and love yourself before you can really extend that love to another. You have to believe that you are lovable and worthy and capable of love. And so that self-care piece is so vital.
And when you're freshly divorced, that can feel impossible.
Yes.
So it's a big process of being able to get out of that loss and grieve it, and then set it aside and be able to grow your confidence again.
Right. That's what was so hard as a parent, watching that with my daughter, my beautiful daughter that is so gifted and talented and just beautiful in every way. To be shattered and crushed, and you could, her self-confidence and have to build that up again. And it's not something you can do for them. It has to come to within them too, and doing the work. I could shower her all day long and tell her how beautiful and how loved she is, but you have to do your own work too through that, and to get that self-belief. And then what a beautiful thing is I watch that come back and her confidence grow. And as you said, that resilience and that peace and joy to be restored is a beautiful thing as a mother to watch.
That's awesome. I was just thinking about the church's efforts lately to be more inclusive and aware of how many mid-singles we have. I mean, half of the church's adults are single. I mean,
isn't that crazy?
More than half. And so all this time we've been feeling like we don't belong. We absolutely belong.
You're the big body of the church. Yes.
Yeah. And they had a fireside for ages 30 and up, and those are the people we serve. We always say anybody beyond the possibility of a first marriage in their 20s is a mid-single to us. That's everyone that we serve.
Yeah.
Everything gets more complicated after that.
Yeah.
And anyway, so the church had a fireside for that age bracket of singles, and they interviewed people who were both divorced, widowed, and later married. And it's interesting how they were very clear about who was widowed and had not yet married, but like they didn't say anything about the reason why the divorced people were single. Like almost as if like inadvertently, like it was a shameful thing to say. And
we don't want to admit that that's among us.
Yeah.
Oh.
And anyway, it didn't go unnoticed by us. And that's something I actually realized the next day, that I still feel like every once in a while, I still feel a little bit of shame about it. And it's like, why? It's just a life experience. Yeah. And so, I mean, what we would encourage everyone to do is just to have it be a life experience and not have it be something we have to wear like a scarlet letter, like scarlet letter D. But be able to just say it with confidence that, that was an experience I had and that's okay.
Right. I think there's confidence that come when you own your reality. I discovered that after my son came out. Like, we didn't start talking about this publicly for 2 years after he came out. Like, before that, I was fine just being the family secret, because I didn't know how people were going to respond, and would they think I was a horrible mother, and I didn't want them being unkind to my son or treat him differently. So this was just going to be our family secret. But as we became public about it and talking about it, like, as we embrace, like, this is our reality. And I know we're not the only family. Like, every family knows someone with either within their family or their friend circle or neighbor or coworker, everyone knows someone that is LGBTQ. So why are we tiptoeing around this subject and being shameful around it? Like, just own the reality and move forward in the best possible positive way in creating a good life for you and your son and your, the family, just moving forward. So I think, as what you said is like, yeah, just embracing, like, this was my experience, and own it. I think there's power that comes with that, and the confidence that helps you to just normalize it. Like, this is my reality, and, eliminate that shame. And
I love
to be
the
able
way
to
we
step
were able
forward.
to relate. It's a different dynamic, but it's a similar feeling that, can I be open about this? And can I, like you said, it can create more confidence in being able to just own your reality and say it as fact and not be ashamed.
Right. So, because so often, again, we go to worst case scenario, people are going to judge us. They're going to think bad about me. It's like, let's not worry about that.
Right. Let me ask you on that too. Did you ever blame yourself for your son going the way he did, or your daughter getting divorced, or any of that stuff? Were there ever moments when you questioned whether you were a good mother?
Often. More so now, I question that as my children are adults and family gatherings, they love to bring up things that you said or did when they were growing up. Like, wow, I wasn't the greatest parent that I thought I was.
Yeah, you look at what they focus on and you think, that's what you remember from your childhood?
Yeah, I know. Remember all the good times and the good things? Yeah. So those things did cross my mind on my initial talk with my son coming out. Like, I wondered, like, what, like, he knew that was probably going through my mind, and he addressed it. Mom, there was nothing that you or dad did. Like, there was nothing that happened to me that caused this. Like, I couldn't have asked for better parents.
I think that was in the video, right?
He knew that was probably going through my mind. And that first night he talked to us, he said, no, Mom, it's nothing. Like, we had family prayers, we read scriptures, we had family home evening, we went to church every week. We were, we were doing the things. And this was not a result of something missed or something that was done. And
probably even if you hadn't done those things, it wouldn't have been different.
No, wouldn't have been any, exactly. It wouldn't have been any different. No, but those things did empower me with tools to be able to, that's why I'm so grateful for the gospel. Like, I don't know how people do this earth life thing without the gospel, because I feel like that's where my strength comes from. And turning to God and guidance and listening for his guidance and helping me navigate this, and the strength and all of that.
One thing I have observed among divorcees is parents and loved ones will sometimes be concerned with, that was a temple marriage. Now, what is the state of this person's soul? And I think we see that with LGBTQ family members too. The family will be worried about, well, that person's left the church or has decided to follow that life. And, they're not going to be part of our eternal family. So how have you navigated those doctrines and the thoughts that we could easily have about them?
Yeah. So for myself, I firmly believe we're going to be an eternal family. So I just trust God. I don't know the process. I don't know what all this is going to look like, but I hold on to that. Like, no, this is my family and we are an eternal family. And I'm not going to stress and worry how all that piece is going to look like, or make myself sick over thinking it's not going to happen. It's like, I believe we're an eternal family, and I'm leaving it up to God. He sees the beginning from the end, and just trusting him in the process.
That's awesome. When I was facing the temple divorce process, the sealing cancellation request, if you will, I was really concerned because I had a bishop tell me, well, your children will be choosing which parent to go with, because if you're not sealed to each other, then they have to choose, and they're going to choose whichever one, is most righteous. And I firmly believed at the time that my former spouse thought he was the most righteous, and that maybe he was right. And, just all these stupid judgments, right? And then I talked to my stake president, because I was like, this just does not feel right. Like, this cannot be right. And he said, you will take into the next life whatever relationships you build in this one. And I think what you just said is a really good example. You said, like, we'll be together because we want to be together. It's because we've created that. You are creating those relationships. And like, don't worry about how that's all going to work. Like, because I think that's what he was basically saying. Like, just, you'll keep the relationships you develop, and, don't worry about it.
Right. And for me, it's like, we don't know how much time we have here in this earth life with our children, and create that space that they want to choose to be with me on the other side. They get that choice that they want to choose that, so yeah, I just, the love and trust, just trusting God.
And that's where the agency is beautiful, if it ends up working that way, right?
Yes. Well, I think the millennium is 1,000 years. Like, we can't even comprehend all of that. It's like, I'm not going to stress and worry about it. Just going to live my best life, create that loving space in my home, keep my covenants, and trust in the end, it's going to be a good ending.
Yeah. Awesome.
I have a good friend who I've known for more than 30 years, and his father was a stake president, and the father was almost like a second father to me in many ways.
This is the swearing stake president.
Yeah,
that's how he was known.
That's the best.
One of the most spiritual people I knew, but yeah, he had kind of a salty tongue. But he was, he was a cowboy. He always wore Western stuff. He was a college professor too, but I mean, he would go up every weekend and work on the family ranch. Well, he had a son, not the one that I'm the closest to, but a different son who came out as gay shortly after his mission. And I think they didn't know exactly what to do because they were so devout. And it took them a little time to find their way. At least that's the way they tell it. But it's the same as you've described, kind of, that when their son comes to their family Christmas party or other family events, he brings his husband. And I said, I said to my friend, how does that work with, with the husband? And he said, he's part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think they look at it kind of like, well, maybe that's not what we would have chosen for him, but people marry people their kids don't want, or their parents would rather they not marry all the time. And, I don't have to, my kids don't have to marry someone I would have chosen for me to treat that person as a member of my family.
Right. And I think, I share this story that, like, within the same time frame, I don't know if it was the same week, but it was like close together. We had 2 children that moved in with their boyfriends, a son and a daughter. And we thought, what is happening to our eternal family? Like that, that shook us. And I said, to my husband, we have to love and embrace. We have to react to this situation with open arms. Or why would our son and daughter want to come home and be around us? Why would their non-member boyfriends want to have anything to do with us or to know anything about the gospel if the very people that they know are going to church every Sunday are so judgmental and cruel? I said, that doesn't make any sense. We have to love. And we did. I'm so glad we did. Like, we just leaned into love and welcomed them in our home. Now, our kids knew that this was hard for us. They grew up in our home, so they knew that this was hard for us, and it just meant the world to them that we were loving their partners. And I'm glad we leaned into that love, because our daughter's boyfriend is her husband, and they have 3 beautiful children together, and he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And our son and his boyfriend, they broke up, and that was a hard breakup. Like, we had grown to love and care about him. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, he's married to a return missionary now. A wonderful guy. They are both, they're great men doing great things and living great lives. And that's our reality. And it was not what I envisioned for my son, but I'm grateful that he did choose wisely, and he chose a good person to be in a committed relationship with. And it's just our reality, and they're all welcomed and loved in our home.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. That actually leads us to a question that Jeff was wondering prior to the interview. We were hoping to know if you would advocate for the church to change anything about how it approaches LGBTQ concerns.
Yeah, I don't advocate for doctrinal change. Like, that's
More
not my
sociocultural.
place. But cultural, yes. And I think it is improving. Like, our church leaders have been encouraging that love and outreach and ministering. That's great. Church website, there's a lot of great videos to help families in navigating this, and stories on there. So I think it's great that the conversations now are happening, and but I'm advocating greatly for cultural change in loving, and anyone who wants to step through those chapel doors, who has that courage, should feel nothing but love, and know that they belong. Slide over on that bench and welcome whoever wants to come. That's what I advocate for, is come more kindness and compassion and empathy, and seeking to understand, and that comes through listening to one another's experiences and stories, and drop the judgment.
Pondering too, because so Jeff has this like kind of silly scenario that helps, like, I think people understand.
It's a thought experiment.
Yeah, thought experiment. What if one day we were all asked to divorce our opposite sex partners and get into same-sex relations, and those are the only people who are allowed at church or in the temple, or it just, everything is completely flipped upside down. How would we handle that?
That was a scenario that our son asked us, which it does. It makes you think, oh, wow. You know, if you had your same attraction, that you were attracted to the opposite sex, but yet you were in the church, you can only marry the same sex. Like,
Yeah.
then it helps you to step in the shoes and like, oh, that would be hard.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
people could do the same thing if you've been married. How many years have you been married?
38 years.
Yeah. So if you've been married
Yeah.
38 years or however long, and you've never experienced divorce, I know you probably came as close to it as you possibly could with your daughter. But you know, if you just never have had that experience or have witnessed it up close, you could ask yourselves, what if that were to happen? You know,
Yeah.
what if one day I found out, you know, that my spouse isn't who he says he is, and you know, we ended right here and now. Like, how would I handle that? Like, I think those are the kinds of questions that can really help us understand people and understand situations we haven't experienced.
Yep, absolutely.
This kind of reminds me of I don't know why, but it reminds me of a friend who has a son that's gay. And he also has 3 daughters that are kind of right now in the process of leaving the church. And he and his wife have like 8 kids. So half of their kids are kind of going a different direction than they might have liked. And he's told me on a few occasions, I've failed as a father. He was a former bishop, very devout. What would you say to him or to any parent who is feeling like, I've failed as a parent because my kids left the church, because my kids gotten divorced, because my kids come out as gay, or whatever the situation might be? What would you say to those parents?
Yeah, make space for those who see things differently. I mean, we have to make that space for everyone in our family to want to be together.
Make space. I love that too. Lean in, make space.
Our heavenly parents, the most perfect parents, had children that chose different way, that were outcast. That self blame, and I think as parents we all go there. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the scriptures help me to kind of put that back in perspective. Like, there's no perfect parents. Like, this, we're learning and growing. And when people we love are stepping away, having a faith crisis, or stepping away from church, it's so important to still just be so respectful. I jotted down a couple of things that President Bednar, I think it was, no, Ballard, President Ballard. Oh, I didn't, I thought I put, oh yeah, I did. President Ballard said, and how to respond to this is, don't preach or lecture, listen to understand and validate, and accept and love them fully. The first step in building loving relationships is listening and accepting the person for who they are. And and I will, testify to that.
That's beautiful.
That's a so key, is that listening and accepting that person. And again, I know I sound like I'm on repeat, that love and trusting God in the process. Our children, I often say, if they can feel our love, that we love them no matter what, and even if that we are there for them, that we love them, then they can believe in a loving God and feel their Heavenly Father's love, or open that space to be able to feel God's love.
You know what? I just thought maybe that's why he needs us to do that. Like, we're providing space for others here on earth to feel his love.
I have a child that kind of stepped away from the faith a few years ago. And I think deep down, he still believes it. He gives indications of it once in a while, but he hasn't found his way back at this point. And I kind of adopt the same attitude you talked about, where I just think he'll be back. It's a matter of time. We'll be an eternal family. It's going to be okay. And I just trust God to take care of that. but I remember being really concerned about it when it first happened. And I went to, I saw his therapist. I was seeing his therapist separately, just family counseling kind of thing. And so I discussed this with her, and she said, well, you can love the church and you can love him. And it's not so much a matter of choosing, but he has to know that your love for him is not conditional upon his being in the church. And, there's a person in my family who would say, well, at least you've got and name my children that are still in the church. No, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's,
No.
I have, X number of children. One is not more important than the other.
Right.
Regardless of what choices they've made or.
Right. And our love for our children should never be based on their choices. Like
Right.
God's love for us is not based on conditions. He loves
Thank
us
heavens.
fully. Exactly. Thank heavens. He loves us for who we are. And that's how our children should know that we love them for who they are and that we're proud of them for who they are. And again, just trust in the process. We don't know the things that they have to learn, but my greatest lessons come through my children. Like I never thought I'd say that I'm grateful for a gay son, but I am. I'm grateful for a gay son and all the other perfectly imperfect children that God sent me, because they have taught me so much and has helped me to, I think, to strengthen Christ-like characteristics. Like I still have a long ways to go, but I mean, compassion, empathy, and kindness, and grace and forgiveness. Most of those things came through my children, experiencing the things that we did through our children. And so I'm grateful for that. Wouldn't trade it.
I think we could just continue asking question after question all night, and we would
I do
learn
have
so
one
much.
more I want to get in.
Okay, let's ask that question and then I'll say it.
Oh, yeah. And this is kind of a big subject, and I know we don't have time for like a full interview on it, but we know that the suicide rate among people going through a divorce is 3 times the national average. And among men, it can be as high as 9 times the national average. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons why men and women are different that way in a divorce situation, but we also know that I think among LGBT youth, there is a higher rate of suicide than their peers. And you've got both of those things that have occurred in your family, not suicide, thank heavens, but I'd like you to speak to that a little bit. And, I'm sure some of this is reiterating the same things, but what do you watch for? How do you, try to help a loved one that, I was never suicidal, but I did lose my will to live for a while going through my divorce.
Yeah.
I understand why people do it, actually.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So if you could speak to that a little bit, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Some of the things that I tools I put in my toolbox was the QPR training, which is the question, persuade, and refer training.
Oh yeah, that's what that is.
And
we're wondering about
and
that.
the first aid, the mental health first aid for youth, went through a training course for that, and a grief course that was through the world's spiritual health organization, to put those tools in my pocket, because so many of the LGBTQ that were reaching out to me were suicidal or had attempted, or and so I wanted to be able to better help to be able to refer them to professionals or people that could truly help them, but to be able to have those conversations, because it's a myth that if we talk about suicide, it's going to create suicide. It's the contrary.
Probably true.
But talking and asking and knowing, the signs to look for, that being withdrawing and changes in personality and such, or a lot of different clues. And sometimes there aren't any clues, but it's important to be sensitive to those issues and to watch for those. Create that safe space so that your loved ones feel safe to tell you when they're struggling, when they're hurting, and when they're down, or they're having those suicidal thoughts. But that the QPR training, if you're not familiar with that, it's something that it can be an online course through Zoom, or an in-person course. And I know there's a lot of awards that are bringing in QPR training to teach youth leaders what to look for, or in the workspace to have the QPR training. I went through that training, but I don't teach the course. I mean, I could, but I never have. I learned it through put my own tools in the toolbox.
Say the words again. QPR.
QPR, and their website is qprinstitute.com. And the Q stands for question, P stands for oh my, what did I say? I should know this. Persuade. And the R is refer. Okay. Yes, it's it helps people recognize those warning signs for suicide, and it's designed to help to save a life. And it is a really good program and tools in that toolbox, because mental health, it's big. It's
So
big. A lot of
audience members, friends, please check out that website, particularly if you have a child that's come out as LGBTQ, or if you have a loved one going through divorce at whatever age.
Yep.
You may be able to help save a life, either from suicide or from just terrible depression for years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, and I think I'm so glad you were able to talk about that, because actually we were wondering about your training and how that affects, the way you interact and the support you're able to give, grief support and mental health first aid, in addition to the QPR. I mean, that's all really important work, and it's loving. You're loving people through that skill that you've developed, and that's awesome. And it kind of goes back to the answer to every question is love. If we keep asking the question, you're probably going to continue saying something along those lines. And it's really quite profound. It's simple. It's not easy all the time. It's like you said, it's messy and it can be complicated, but it is the thing that you keep going back to. Lean into love. And, we've touched on a lot of topics that we've addressed in the past, like our last guest was Dr. Greg Bear. I don't know if you've read his book, but real love is his passion, and that unconditional, loving manner that we can develop in ourselves towards others, independent of other people's choices, independent of, so what we might want in return, just loving. And as you know, we've had Gainal Condi on the show, and we talked about mental health and suicide risk factors with her as well. I believe we have a mutual friend in common, Dennis Schleicher. He hasn't been on our show yet. Yeah, Dennis is great. I know he's doing a lot of outreach efforts to help people understand that, his faith as a member of our church, as an LGBTQ, as a gay man who's a convert and very active in our faith, and just to help people feel heard and understood and loved and cared for. And I love what you're doing for parents and also for children of parents who, are navigating all of this stuff within the church and figuring out how to move forward and be a family and be loving. And I appreciate that you were willing to come talk to us and be able to also relate to our audience, who are primarily mid-singles and later married couples with blended families, who have some similar challenges with regards to figuring out where they fit, how they belong, and how they can move forward and have love in their lives again. So
I think maybe the definition that sort of distills on me after all this conversation is maybe loving boldly is loving freely without restraint or conditions.
Excellent.
And judgments.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much for having this conversation and inviting me to be a guest. And I love these real conversations because I think so many more than we think can relate, and they need to hear these difficult conversations that shouldn't be difficult.
Yeah, we so appreciate having you come on, and we'll say to our audience, remember that any time is a great time for more love in your life. We'll catch you next time.